Hey, what is going on, all my fellow godlies and Warframe enthusiasts around the world? This is Vance from the Warframe God Build series, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Rift Walker Limbo. Now, just like the mag ReForged, not a whole lot has changed with this guy. Like, really anything has changed. Energy siphon's not needed. I'm going to throw this out. And I'm going to throw it out in favor of empowered blades. And why I'm going to do that is because Limbo controls dimensions. There's no reason for you to not, deal with that negative 90 shields per hit, especially with the charged melee that we're using. That's essentially the only thing that's changed in this build is the melee weapon that we've chosen to run, and it's going to be really useful when you start getting up into the higher waves of like a defense or an excavation. You can simply just freeze time and then nothing can hit you at that point, which the 90 shield drain isn't going to help you, isn't going to hurt you at all. Lightning Dash, it's always been here. I'm not going to move it because it's primarily utility and it makes Limbo jump around the map a little bit quicker. Prime Continuity, Constitution, Natural Talent, Vitality, Prime Flow, Rift Torrent, Haven, and Intensify. Now these two mods, they probably need the most explaining. Haven is one of those mods where if you banish your teammates, you grant them health. So how this helps them effectively is you'll put them in the void and it'll grant them plus 25% of their max health. And I get it all the time, people complaining about me banishing them, and they don't freaking realize that I'm actually helping them. I'm restoring their health. Some people have even gone so far as to be obnoxious and say, well, I don't need your heals. Well, if you don't need my heals, then I'm not doing my job as a Limbo using this augment. So keep it in mind if you're irritated by Limbo players, all you gotta do is press roll and you can get out of their banish. It'll probably help them in that event because they can just banish you again and keep restoring your health. Be very wary of that. With Rift Torrent, Limbo deals 30% extra damage for each enemy affected by Rift Surge while in the Rift. That's going to be really helpful because, again, in those late waves of a defense or excavation, when enemies are taking too much of a brutal hit, this is going to make it so they die faster, and it's going to boost team DPS overall. So that's the reason why that's staying, and it's not ever leaving this build as far as I'm concerned. Now, in terms of primaries, I could just about use anything with him. There's a whole lot of primaries that are rendered really in-game viable, but the one that sticks out the most to me is Sancti Tigris, not only because it has that automatic puncture, but because that the affinity collection will eventually yield health return, which in some cases, if I'm in the heat of the moment, I can't really focus on getting my health back, and I don't really want to rely on my sentinel. Sometimes my sentinel is dead for whatever the reason. It shouldn't happen with Limbo. If he enters the void, the sentinel should as well, but again, shit happens. So in the event that I can't rely on my sentinel for healing return, I'm going to use Sancti Tigris with this mod setup. Because it does amazing damage, it scales really, really well with Limbo's powers, and it's just overall really reliable. Same thing goes for Cyanoid Gamma Core. Haven't changed really anything on this build either, primarily because it's just so damn good. It hits for good DPS, it restores your energy, not that you're ever going to need that because after Limbo's rework, let's face it, he doesn't have problems with energy, so if you really wanted to, you could swap out his secondary weapon for something else. I don't really have much of a recommendation because this is something that I rely heavily upon for run-and-gun missions where you're going through the mission, like for instance an exterminate. I like to run Cyanoid Gamma Core because it's quick, it's painless, it gets the job done. And finally, for the cream of the crop, the Jack Hussar. Now this is the most essential change to this build and why there needs to be a ReForged for Limbo altogether. With Defiled Snapdragon, Berserker, Prime Pressure Point, Shocking Touch, Prime Fever Strike, Prime Reach, Prime Fury, True Steel, and Organ Shatter, this stands to be probably the most formed melee weapon I've done, considering the fact that it's using 4 prime mods, which is absurd. The damage is really amazing. On top of that, you benefit from a charged attack, and what's unique about Jet Kusar is when you do the charged attack, it's actually kind of a ranged attack. He throws like a grenade, it hits the ground and explodes. It does really good damage, it does really good crowd control, and in those instances in which you have enemies frozen anyway, that's all it's going to do is crowd control and blast enemies for amazing damage. I would recommend that if you run with this, that you also have it exclusively equipped as melee only, and then hold the block button while you're meleeing, because that's the best combo that you can get from this. It's been shown to take out like level 150 heavies, no sweat. So that's the reason why that's here. And if you look at our sentinel, we are no longer using Doriga, and it's a crying shame. Not because Doriga can't hack it, that's certainly not the case. Doriga is by far one of the best sentinels in my opinion. But I'm using Jin now because I just have a tendency to get a lot closer to enemies now that I'm using Limbo and the whole stasis ability. So the mentality of this using Jin is that you don't need the distance that Doriga once provided. In fact, you want to hope and pray that Jin stays alive because he's being used with Limbo. Essentially, Jin is kind of useless anywhere else because it goes down too quickly. So our hope is with that Limbo, Jin will be the perfect pairing, and they'll end up complementing each other in the long run. If you're meleeing only, then Jin is going to proc pretty often, so it's going to be very helpful in-game because it does that corrosive blast wave that strips armor to a certain degree. I'm not familiar with the actual numbers, but it's helpful for regardless, and it makes Jin a whole lot more viable than what he'd be with somebody else. Now, in terms of weapons that I'm using for Jin, I'm still using the standard Volklock. Since I'm using a shotgun primary, I'm going to use a rifle primary for the sentinel. I've got a Riven here that does plus heat, plus damage, and plus toxin. That's really good for our corrosive and heat combinations, is what we're going to shoot for all the time. Go for a lot of status with this build, and you'll see it do wonders. In conclusion, Limbo didn't really need a ReForged. The build that we did previously is perfectly viable still to this day, but if you really want to get the most out of Limbo, this is kind of a direct upgrade build. So if you enjoyed this video, it always helps if you smash that like button, comment, share, subscribe, do as I always encourage you to do, and until next time, this is Vance, signing out. Peace.